Welcome to Indie Beacon Radio, where creative souls can find help in marketing their creations. You can send questions for each show on Twitter using the hashtag IndieBeacon. Now sit back and enjoy learning about our guest for this show.
This is Grace-allison. We are welcoming Chenda Tom, who has been an educator for over 23 years. Her passion and desire to educate children and make a positive impact on their lives is apparent in her daily work. In her book, He Knows the Plan, she recounts her personal journey of survival and resilience as she faced obstacles in both Cambodia and America. Chenda believes that life is a gift. No matter how many valleys we must overcome, we must be intentional about living a life that has a positive impact. Let's welcome Chenda.
Good evening.
Well, Chenda, tell us, what part of your life does your autobiography cover?
My autobiography covers the first 18 years of my young life.
And tell us about that.
Well,
explain a little bit more about that.
Okay. My young life started in Phnom Penh, Cambodia, which is the capital of Cambodia, where I was born. And my life started a little bit harsh in that I was forced into the concentration camp, or the killing fields of Cambodia, that most people know about in history books. And so my family and I were forced into the concentration camp on April 17th, 1975. So that was the first day of the end for us. And so we survived the killing fields and lived there for over 3 years and 8 months. So we were there from 1975 to early 1979, when we were released from the captivity.
So tell us about your Aunt Laura. Your Aunt Laura was very instrumental in all of this change in your life.
Oh, yes. My Aunt Laura is my life saver. Because of her, I attribute my life and still being alive to her, because when the war ended and we escaped from Cambodia to Thailand, she was the one who, did the paperwork and everything for us to start a new life in another country. And we were able to come to America in September of 1981, and my Aunt Laura is the one who raised me. And
why is that? What happened
to today?
What happened to your mother and father?
My mother died in 1978. My youngest sister from my mom and dad died at childbirth. And so I'm the oldest of 3 girls from my mom and dad. My middle sister, she died around 1.5 years. She just didn't make it through the trek. And then my youngest sister, she died at childbirth. And then my mother died about 2 months or so after her due to malnutrition, disease, illness. And so that's when she passed. And when she passed, I was placed in an orphanage for a little while.
Is that where your Aunt Laura found you?
Well, because my book is through stories that she would tell me, and then later on, when I find my father again, he would tell me, is she remembers when I was in the orphanage, she would ask permission from her leaders in her camp, because at that time, people and genders of every age were placed in different camps. And so she was in a widower's camp, and she would ask permission when time permitted. And so she would take the chance to come see me. And so just kind of imagine a young woman and a young girl, you know, in the middle of a stream, a countryside. And she said that's where she would bathe me at least once a week, because in the orphanage, you know, no one took care of us. They barely fed us. And we were just placed into these rooms when it was time to sleep. And so she remembers going and checking on me at least once a week.
And so it was Ronald Reagan in 1981, was that it, when he opened the doors to the refugees, to America?
That is correct, and that is how my aunt and I were able to get approval to come to America because of President Ronald Reagan, allowing us to come in as refugees from war-torn countries.
And that was when the Khmer Rouge was the communist regime at the time, and they'd been training soldiers in the forest and creating an army to take over the country of Cambodia, and they were doing a good job of that. It was no wonder that you were able to escape.
It was a traumatic experience, you know, for me as a child. Of course, as a child, I don't remember as much as the adults in my life, but you know, children are very resilient beings, and I think that's why I call my book A Story of Survival and Resilience, because children, and I guess that's why I am in the profession I am today, I believe that children are very resilient beings, even through the trauma. And I remember bits and pieces of my life in the concentration camp. For example, being hungry all the time. I always joke that, maybe it's not a joke, I don't know, but I always say that my growth was probably stunted because I was hungry all of the time. Those 3 years, 8 months, some odd days while we were held in captivity, being told when to eat, what to eat, when to sleep, when to work, all of that.
Did they make you work in the concentration camp?
Oh, yes. Everyone worked. Everyone. Because if you were not able to work, this is of every age, if you were not able to work, you're deemed useless. And so babies, young children did not survive. The elderly did not survive. And that's why during 3 years, 8 months, some odd days, 1.7 million, which is about a fourth of the Cambodian population during that time, died. And in the history books, they have found many skulls, stitches, and skulls that are now in museums in Cambodia now, that were dug by those very same people whose skulls are in there.
So why did you choose to write and publish your book now?
You know, I've been wanting to write my book and share my story for over 20 years. And a lot of it is, it's personal, and I'm a very private person. And so it's taken me a long time to let go. And because I am a counselor by profession and educator, I know that by sharing my story, I'm also owning my story. And by owning my story, I am able to move forward. And my hope is that by sharing my story and letting people know that just because you come from a place that's harsh and traumatic, you can still overcome. And so my hope is that my life can be an example of someone who has overcome.
I agree with you. It's a very important part of the process of healing is to tell your story, because to get it out and have people hear you and acknowledge that this is something that really happened to you, it really does help you feel like you've been acknowledged and that you're on your way to a new life.
Yes, exactly. And it has been very cathartic for me. to be able to share my story. I was very afraid. I think that's why it took me so long. I think I've been done with my book for many years now. I just couldn't let it go. And then when I did finally decide, okay, Lord, I'm just going to let it go, and you do what you will with it, I have been so blessed by all of the support that I have received, from my friends, my colleagues, my family, and even people I don't even know, which is so amazing. And so that is my hope, is that I can share my story and help others to also overcome and move forward with their life and become successful, whatever success means to them.
Was it difficult to relive the events as you were writing your story?
It was, because, and I have written different parts of it over the years, that over time I would write little bits and pieces of it, and then as I edited, I did take some things out, because when I wrote this book, I wanted to for young people to be able to read it as well. So it's a simple book, it's a quick read, but it has a lot of meaning to it. And so as I wrote and edited, it was healing for me. And it continues to be a healing process for me, even though, I have accepted my fate for many years now. But looking back, and because I'm a Christian now, I can see God working his way through me throughout all of those years, and the people around me, just by genuine care and love that I didn't even deserve. I didn't think I deserved that. So, yes, it has been tough, but healing at the same time.
Well, we're going to take a break right now and go to our sponsors, and we'll be back with Chenda Tom for He Knows the Plan in Part 2.
Howdy, I'm John Cruder, the Midnight Marauder. I guess you might say that I'm a vigilante who rights the wrongs I see along my many travels to balance the scales of justice, especially those of the corrupt and murderous members of the Town Council of Bandera, Texas. You can follow my many adventures in a series of Midnight Marauder books written by Roy Clinton on Amazon.com and TopWesterns.com. Or, if you prefer, listen to my adventures in audiobook form by downloading them from Audible.com or iTunes. This is R. William James, the voice of the Midnight Marauder.
Do you love to read great new ebooks? Visit EBG247.com. Be the first to discover the next bestseller. At EBG247, we have the web's largest selection of great new book reads, from that amazing new fiction or nonfiction to horror, romance, and fantasy. We even have today's best children's books. That's EBG247.com. New books arrive daily, and all ebooks start at just 99 cents. If you love to read, then you'll love EBG247.com. Low prices, large selection, and an easy-to-use website. It's all only at EBG247.com.
Headlines. Cryptocurrency vultures are circling around failing governments. Darknet predators are rushing to market with their newest digital product. They promise economic salvation, even as they coupon clips straight from your digital wallet. The newest techno-thriller installment from Brakefield and Berkey, The Enigma Source. Book 10 of the Enigma series continues the combat of cyber good guys versus cyber thugs set in today's digital landscape.
Remembrances from the Heart is a compilation book of heartfelt eulogies and poems that honor the deceased and comfort the living. Beautifully illustrated and spiritually written by Christian author Vicki Valen Johnson, who has created an artistry of words that will be healing for those suffering and inspiring to those listening, offering a sensitive message behind each passage. This cherished table book is available worldwide or at a Christian bookstore near you. For more information, please visit remembrancesfromtheheart.com.
Welcome to Indie Beacon Radio, where creative souls can find help in marketing their creations. You can send questions for each show on Twitter using the hashtag IndieBeacon. Now sit back and enjoy learning about our guest for this show.
Welcome back. This is Grace-Allison, your host, and we are talking with Chenda Tom about her book, He Knows the Plan. Now, Chenda has had some great reviews with this book. Patrick Fancher says, He Knows the Plan is a gripping story, which in a sense shines the spotlight upon anyone who has been blessed with daily necessities, yet ungratefully complains in discontent. This story shares horrific circumstances the author and her family had to endure during the period of war, describing the killing fields. Welcome back, Chenda. Now tell us, tell our audience where they can find you. What, Facebook, Twitter, email, where can people find you?
Well, I am on Facebook as Chenda Tom Moore. That's my married name. I'm also on Twitter. And then I'm also on Instagram.
Spell your name. It's an unusual spelling, so people can find you.
Yes, Chenda, Chenda, and then Thomas, Tom.
And there is a special meaning behind your name. Tell us about the meaning of Chenda.
Yes. So I like to think that I am, my parents' love child. I am the oldest of all of the children. And my parents were young when I was born. They were around 21 years old. And Chenda, that's how you pronounce that in Cambodian, means peace and love, which is ironic because of my beginnings. But Chenda is normally used in Cambodian love songs. So that brings me, just makes my heart happy when I think of my parents giving me such a name with such a special meaning.
And there was a reason why you wrote your book also with a spiritual context from Jeremiah 29:11.
Yes. As I'm thinking about, my future books, and, I wrote this book after I became a Christian, and so my second book will be about my path toward becoming a Christian. And so when I thought about my Bible verse in my life, I think about Jeremiah 29:11, which from New King James, it says, "For I know the thoughts that I think toward you, says the Lord, thoughts of peace and not of evil, to give you a future and a hope." And so when I think about that verse and I ponder back on my life the last 40-plus decades, I think, God has always been there, especially when I didn't even know him. And so when I wrote this book and I was thinking about the name, and I remember coming up with this name probably about 5 years ago as I'm driving to work. You know how things just kind of come up in your mind.
Oh, sure.
When,
yes.
When you're driving.
Comes forward, right?
Yes, and I remember the exact morning as I'm driving to work, and I'm thinking, I have these conversations with the Lord on my way to work, and I'm thinking, Lord, I know you know that I'm writing this book, and someday it's going to get published, but I have no idea what to call it. And so it just came to me, and I'm thinking, well, he knows the plan. He's always known the plan. And so it stuck. And I was like, that's it. That's the name of my book. And so that's where He Knows the Plan comes from. And my hope is, if it works out, I'd love to make it a trilogy. So the second will be Finding My Way to Him, which is the Lord.
Are there a few pages that you can read to us and give us a little feel for what the book is about?
Yes. As I mentioned earlier, I was raised by my aunt, and my father is still alive. But in early 1979, kind of toward the end of our captivity, because the population was dwindling, these leaders decided to come visit the camps, and they decided to just pair people up and have these communal marriages. And as fate would have it, my dad was paired with my stepmother, and they fell in love due to the circumstances. They survived the killing fields as well, and they are still married today. And both of them were able to start a new life in France, because France was a country who supported Cambodia for many, many years until they, stepped out. And so the French government continued to support the Cambodian people during that time. And so my dad and stepmother made it to France. And so we were looking for each other for many years, from 1979 to 1991. And so my dad and I reunited in 1991, which is when this ends, as I'm about to leave for college. And so when I think about my father, I think about the time when we reunited when I was in the orphanage. So I'd like to read that portion to the audience tonight. Okay, here we go.
Do.
If you're following me, I'm on page 57 of my book. It's the chapter is Reunion with My Father. One of the turning points in my life occurred when my father drove his ox cart across my path one unassuming morning. In the orphanage, children of every age had jobs. That morning, along with about 10 to 12 other children, we marched into the forest to gather twigs. We were guarded by young soldiers between the ages of 11 and 13 years old. Imagine a group of young elementary students walking in a straight line, being guarded by soldiers instead of teachers. Instead of a hallway within a school, we were in the middle of a field with the forest as walls. As we were marching into the forest to collect firewood, here comes a line of men driving ox carts heading into the forest. I look out and see a man who looks like my father. He motions the ox come to a stop as he looks at the line of children. A thought must have passed through his mind, hoping that one of the children could be his daughter. Our eyes locked. I see my father, and he sees me. We must have experienced a moment of joy like nothing else. As my father looks at the young soldiers, daring them to shoot us, I run out of line toward him, risking death for both of us. I run under the belly of the ox as my father reaches down, lifts me up, and sits me next to him. I barely notice the size of the animal, the barrel of the guns, or the sweat of his hand as my father leant down to grab my arm. The young soldiers were so taken back by my disobedience that it took them a minute to respond in anger. We had nothing else to lose if they had chosen to shoot us that morning. Being dead would have been better than the continued suffering. They did not shoot us because we were not worth wasting their bullets. So this is the turning point in my captivity, because after this point, my father was able to take me with him until 1979, and he was able to convince his camp leader to allow me to stay. So because of this moment, I survived. I believe that, because if my father had not found me, I'm not sure where I would be. But I just, as a mother now, as a parent, I think about what turmoil he must have gone through as a father, as a man, as a husband, who seemingly lost everything until that moment when he sees his only surviving daughter.
That is an amazing story. That is really, really amazing. How did you get to America?
Well, my aunt she completed some documents, and from 1979, when we made it to Thailand, at that time, the American Red Cross had a camp to support the Cambodian refugees in Thailand. And so at that time, we were given, food, clothing, and so forth. And then my aunt completed the paperwork to come to America. And like you said earlier, in 1981, President Ronald Reagan opened the doors for refugees from war-torn country to come to America. And I remember getting on an airplane. It was, do you remember TWA?
Oh, yeah.
Airline? Oh, yeah. And so that was my first plane ride ever. And I remember when I was in school here in America, I remember writing an essay about my just thought about how beautiful the flight attendants were. And they had different color hair, light skin, and I'm thinking to myself, America must be just a beautiful place. And so when we landed in Albuquerque, New Mexico. That was my first city in America. And then they took us to a little town called Belen, New Mexico, where they had other Cambodian refugees. And we stayed there for a little while. And then, my aunt was sent to night school to learn English. And, of course, I was placed in school. And that's a whole other experience by itself, just going to school and not being able to communicate with teachers. Poor teachers.
Well, Chenda, we're going to wrap it up. And so tell us again where people can find you on Facebook and Twitter.
Yes, I am on Facebook, Chenda Tom Moore. I am Chenda TM on Twitter and also on Instagram. My book can be found on lulu.com, of course, Texas Authors, Amazon, and also Barnes & Noble.
We want to thank you for being with us tonight, Chenda. You are a very brave woman, and you've brought so much to your life with teaching in the school district down at Pearland, counseling services. You actually take care of 53 guidance counselors down there. So you're making an amazing difference with who you are working with, and we really want to thank you for being with us tonight.
Well, thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate this opportunity. And Grace, thank you so much for being so kind and just working with me and allowing me this time to share my story.
Hello, Texas authors. My name is Randy James, coming to you from my Carrollton recording studio, where I spend time writing and producing commercials for my radio endorsement clients, as well as my private freelance clients. I'd like the opportunity to help you sell more books with a commercial like this and get listeners of Dear Texas Radio excited about your title, all at a special introductory price, available to members of the Texas Association of Authors. Call or text 214-762-1942. That's 214-762-1942.
I am Grace-Allison Blair, an award-winning author, motivational speaker, and modern mystic. I have combined spiritual and psychological principles in my nonfiction self-help books under Grace-Allison and fiction books under Grace Blair. Go to modernmysticmedia.com to find Do You Have a Dream? 5 Keys to Realize Your Dream, and my novel, Einstein's Compass, a YA time traveler adventure.
A new online bookstore, IndieLector.store, is unlike any other. IndieLector.store offers great prices from top indie authors and supports authors at the same time by paying them more for their books. IndieLector.store has a readers club that gives you free books and special deals. Watch the IndieLector.store continue to grow before it opens in the fall of 2019 at IndieLector.store.
Have you ever thought what you would do if you had to put your life on hold to parent your parents? Charlotte Cannon has lived the journey caring for 3 parents with dementia, Alzheimer's, and Parkinson's. Her book, You Have to Laugh to Keep from Crying, How to Parent Your Parents is a survival guide for adult children caring for aging seniors. Her book is available at books.txauthors.com, Amazon, or your favorite bookstore.
Thank you for listening to Indie Beacon Radio, where creative souls can find help in marketing their creations. To learn more about Indie Beacon services, to be a guest on the show, or to advertise on our show, please visit our website at indiebeacon.com.